Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about Synth. I haven't drawn him all too much. I think I've drawn him maybe 3 times. Um, so you'll likely see me changing things up in the video. I also don't have a color palette for him, so you're going to see me messing around a little bit. Synth was actually not originally part of the story in a main way. He was only mentioned at, the start of the book, the very first book, but eventually when I began writing it again on my own, he took, a much more present role, even though he's not alive. Synth and Zerani have, a really tense relationship, as would be expected when you are exiled and then have your king killed in front of you by your past best friend. A very tense relationship would be expected. Okay, sorry, I'm reading off my script. Oh crap, I lost it. Okay. So Synth and Erwin are related, and while they do have, some similar traits, they don't look as similar as, Zerani and Silva do, for example. But, yeah. So let's get into Synth's backstory. Since Synth is, an important side character, his backstory is a little less developed, so if things seem a tad bit weird in it, it's because I either missed it or I haven't found a solution to it yet. He does eventually take a much more, prominent role later in the book, but, I haven't even started writing that part. Synth was born to Theodore and Josephine Kane. Theodore, his father, was, a noble lord, and so he owned a lot of land. And when Synth turned 5, his mother died due to pneumonia. She was laid to rest in a pond on their land. The human side of the continent believes that water is everything, so water is where everyone is laid to rest. This is the same for the elven side, though when Zerani turned every elf into a demon, she was, added in on top of that water kind of aspect. Synth lived on the human side of the continent until his father sent him to the other side of the continent. And at this time, the elves and humans had a really good relationship, so he was in no danger. So Synth continued his education on the elven side, and when he turned 14, he met Zerani. And he eventually meets King William, but doesn't like him all that much, and, but he doesn't mind using King William to fund his education when his father passes away. Synth went back to the human side to give his father a water burial and to check on the estate that was now in his possession. And he returns shortly after the funeral to the elven capital where he resides, renting out the estate for other families. When he turns 18, he and Zerani race to Lake Icefeather, and when her horse spooks and falls over the cliff edge, sending her into the freezing water, he rides down to the beach and manages to save her before the ice freezes over. During her recovery, he plans on telling her that he loves her, but when he hears her talking to the voices, he decides not to, and instead he listens in on her. He talks with her doctors and asks them to increase her painkiller dosage. Since Zerani's voices can kind of float around, they are still bound to her, but they can kind of, float within 100 feet of her and hear things that she can't hear on her own. They overhear this and they report back to Zerani. So she knows that it was him who increased the dosage of her painkillers. When he turns 19, he goes to Zerani's crowning as the new commander, and the entire time she does not talk to him. She does eventually call him to her office, and she hands him his elven citizenship, with the words exiled stamped on it. He's very obviously confused, so he tries to argue with her, trying to figure out why. And this only makes Zerani angry, and when she threatens to have him executed instead of being exiled, he finally leaves. He goes over to the human side of the continent, residing in his home again, he applies to be part of the King's Guard. He had training on the Elven side of the continent, so he had the proper, credentials to fight as a guard on that side. So when King Oz accepts his offer, and he moves to the human capital when he turns 20. He was in court the day that Zorani did her spell to turn the elves into demons, and the sudden shift in the nobles caused them to be ostracized on the human side, and most ended up leaving back to their home country, causing even more stress on the now demon side of the continent, as now they have even more mouths to feed with very little resources. When he sees Zorani again, she has changed. She seems harsher, and when he sees her lose her temper and kill the king, he freezes, allowing himself to nearly be killed. Zorani saves him from this death, but this makes him an outcast, as he was the only one to have survived on the King's Guard. The monarchy falls on the human side of the continent, shifting to a democracy that he helps fund, and he even serves the first president as his closest guard. When King William appears at the court asking to talk to Synth, he agrees. King William tells Synth to kill his daughter, as she started a war, but by this time the war is nearly over. Synth disagrees. While he does not like Zorani anymore, he will not kill her. King William, not taking the hint, approaches him one more time after the war ends, telling Synth that the reason the war ended was because Zorani killed a child, a baby. Synth agrees. Synth doesn't think that Zorani deserves to live anymore as well. Killing a child is kind of the lowest of lows. Don't do it. So he sends a letter to Zorani, and when he receives temporary immunity, he enters the demon country. When he talks with Zorani, he starts to realize what he did to her, and why she did what she did. But when she says that she had to do it for her country, he feels a spark of anger in him. And so, he stabs her with the anesthetic / too much of the painkiller, and she tells him that he's an awful person, and that he's the reason King August died. This hits Synth to his core, but he still tells her that he cared about her all the way up until he killed the baby. Alright, we're getting close to the end of his backstory. King William seals the lake, making it impenetrable as long as Zorani is asleep. So people can still, fish on it, but there's, a barrier deep down in it where, Zorani is. And it's, keeping her from floating up and, waking up again. Synth nearly kills King William there, but does not. Instead, he sends a letter to King Aaron and tells him of his father's treason. When he speaks as a witness at King William's trial, admitting to his crime, it does condemn King William. Even though Synth admitted to his crime, King Aaron pardons him, though Synth wishes that he hadn't been pardoned. Synth travels back to the human country, where he is now considered a hero, as he ended the evil creator's life. He ends up marrying a woman and has 2 kids with her. And still feeling guilty about how he betrayed his old friend, he commits suicide by falling into Icefeather Lake, becoming one of the claimed souls. Synth does eventually wake up, only this time inside of Zorani's mind. Synth does try to explain himself to Zorani, eventually, but the other voices overlap him and making him inaudible every time he does try to speak to her directly. And eventually he gets pulled from Zorani's mind by force and ends up in Silva's mind. He doesn't exactly like being in Silva's mind, but it's better than being in Zorani's paranoid brain. Eventually, Synth learns how to physically manifest so Silva can see him, but no one else can. So, similar to Zorani, she seems crazy when she talks to him, though she does tell Erwin about Synth. Thank you for listening to me talk about Synth. while he isn't a super bad guy, he isn't a good guy. I mean, he's better than King William. Yeah. Thank you.